Alright guys, what's going on? Coming back after a pretty rough weekend in Australia. A lot faster pace than I expected it to be, but we're going to be going into Miami for our week 3 race. It's going to be our home race, and what I wanted to show you guys was the custom helmet that we also had made from Venturi Studios. Let it load here in a second. Custom USA version of our helmet. It's just a little bit more blue than red. And we'll be sporting that for this home GP for Miami and Unity Sports. So as always, we're going to get right into qualifying after practice, and then we will get back to you guys once we start doing those runs. Alright, a little bit of latency there on the loading in, but that was a shot that we were looking forward to, but we didn't get it till this race. So very nice quick glance at the helmet in action, as you guys will see the helmet on our overhead view while we do our run. So we're gonna go ahead and get out there before the rain and see what we can do on these soft tires. Alright, for Miami, we're running a pretty good time, 1:32.4, about a half, 600ths of a second ahead of Dan Ticktum for our first run of the qualifying here on the softs. We're gonna go ahead and swap over to, let's see if he's actually, he's about to finish. No, it's loose. Where was, I guess Tickton just finished his, yeah, he just finished his lap, no improvement really. And we're gonna go ahead and swap over to another set of softs and see if we can improve our time, and make sure we run again, that way we don't get knocked out of Q1 like we did in the last 2 races. So we'll get back out on the track. Alright, as you guys saw, we went a little bit wide there right before the last chicanes. We were a second up on our time, but we ended up increasing by about 0.2 of a second. Dan Tickton was not able to, well, he did improve some, but not able to improve. He got knocked out to P20. I have been trying to save money up to go towards the second driver. So we're hoping towards the end of the season he will definitely improve, but we are working on his pace, so he should be able to get a few positions up the grid, as we see a grid position penalty for Mick Schumacher in the pass. So he'll be taking 5 positions. I don't know what happened there. We'll actually take a look here and see what happened. Mick Schumacher collision with Leclerc for a grid penalty, so that's very unfortunate. But Leclerc did end up in P7 for Q1. So we're gonna go ahead and see what we can do in Q2 and see how many more positions we can take. All right, so we pushed as hard as we could. If you actually didn't notice, we started our first run on old softs to get a general area, and that's why our green was so high. That's why we were about a second ahead of our lap time. So we used the old softs, and we used the new softs for Q2 for our last run. Crossing the line at the very last second to be able to make this final run. Otherwise, we would have been knocked out of Q2. But provisional P9 for Q2 at a 131.7, definitely better than I thought it would be. Charles Leclerc getting the grid penalty as well. We're gonna go ahead and take a look and see what that is. He had a collision with Hamilton, so both Charles Leclerc and Mick Schumacher end up getting a grid penalties for this race. So that definitely doesn't help them in the driver standings, especially with Ferrari being in P1 currently for the driver standings. And Sergio Perez running a 130.71 ahead of Carlos Sainz. So let's get into that top 10 shootout and see how much more we can improve, if at all. So yeah, definitely feeling better compared to last weekend, and those aero upgrades are definitely helping us out. So let's get into that shootout. All right, coming into Q3 here, it looks like we're gonna have to be hitting the rain. So our setup isn't quite built for the rain, but it's saying that they want us to use intermediates. So we're gonna go ahead and see what we can do here. Pierre Gasly and Max Verstappen already hitting the track. As we have some wear and tear here, we have we're gonna hopefully make it through the race without DNFing with the MGU-H and then the gearbox. With only the 10 race here. Looks like there will be rain within the next 10 or so minutes. And then we're going to swap on over to the softs, possibly towards the end. All right, here we go.
With qualifying finished, it's time to remind ourselves once again of our top three: Hamilton, Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. Well, that wraps up qualifying, but don't worry, we'll be back tomorrow as we head into the Grand Prix.
All right, so that doesn't really, luck's not really on our side there with the rain. It's going to be ending right after qualifying, so we didn't get to change over to the softs and sneak a last lap in there and steal Q1 or P1 from Lewis Hamilton for the Miami GP. But we're starting in a strong P10, so we're hoping that we're going to be doing pretty good on the grid. Dan Ticktum going to be starting, I think, P20, depending on those penalties. See where Schumacher ends up. So let's get to the race.
Formula One has arrived in the Sunshine State for spectacular sunsets, gentle breezes, warm waters, and for what will be a fantastic race day here at the Miami International Autodrome. Sitting at the southeastern coast of Florida, the Miami International Autodrome has 19 corners and 3.36 miles of racing. It's a circuit designed to encourage close racing while meeting the highest safety standards. Either way, I'm sure it's one that will please the fans. It's time to see how our drivers are stacking up after yesterday's exciting qualifying session. An immense lap from Lewis Hamilton yesterday puts him on pole position, and Max Verstappen lines up alongside. Considering the rest of the grid, we have Perez, Sainz, George Russell, and Norris, Ricciardo, Leclerc, Gasly, and Johnson, Ocon, Fernando Alonso, Kevin Magnussen, and Joe, Vettel, Bottas, Mick Schumacher, and Nicholas Latifi, Stroll, Ticktum, Albon, and Yuki Tsunoda. Now it's almost time for lights out, so let's go down to the track. Anthony Davidson joins me once again in the commentary box, and it's fantastic to have you with us here, but I'm curious, as a man with experience out on the track, how do you stop those pre-race nerves from becoming overwhelming when you're lining up on the grid?
Well, I imagine they'll be starting to feel the adrenaline as they anticipate the rundown into turn one, a bit like preparing to go into battle. The unknown situation will bring nerves, but that's a good thing. It will keep them focused on the moment and on their surroundings as we build towards the start of the Grand Prix.
I know this is your home Grand Prix, but treat it like any other race. Let's not make any unnecessary risks.
All right, as we can see by the lineup, pretty good start. The 2 races with penalty. Excuse me. And Dan Ticktum starting in P20, so hopefully he will have a decent race here. I don't know why it's time intervals, I guess. But I don't think it will let me edit the strategy for it. It will let me edit the strategy for softs. Let's see here. I am P10, so if I wanted to, if there was a
Okay, incredible parking there, nice one. That's going to give you the edge if you can get a good launch as the race starts.
Alright, hopefully you guys are excited as I am with that lineup as we pull up to the grid here and move on to our 5 red lights. Latency was a little buggy here on those 5 red lights, but we're not a problem, although we had a decent start off the top. But in a position to get Pierre Gasly, and we ended up holding the brakes a little bit too much here on turn 1. Increasing the gap between myself and Pierre Gasly in P9 as he's gained a little bit of ground on me, so. And making it to Q3 in qualifying felt pretty good, so we're in a pretty decent position here as Dan Tickton now P14 off the start from P20 where he started. So Charles Leclerc, Pierre Gasly in front of us, Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso in the Alpines next to me. A little bit of contact with Esteban Ocon as he tries to make a move. As we're utilizing these mediums as best as possible, going late on the brakes, not getting enough heat into the rear tires as I would have liked to. As Esteban Ocon moves on the outside of that lane and makes a move on both myself and Pierre Gasly. As we're coming up the last chicane into the highway to the long back straight here. Everybody coming through a little bit too slow for the stewards as they set a yellow flag in that sector. As we all have to come to a pretty close and slow pace here. As Dan Tickton has now made his way up the grid behind myself in P13 as Fernando Alonso tries to make a move on both of us on the inside. Only managing to make a position against Dan Tickton, of our teammate there. And that's basically it for into lap 1 as Kevin Magnussen holds a decent P11 in front of us, about a half second or so, give or take. As, we try to close in on him while we wait for DRS to come about the next lap. And Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri in front of him. A little bit of contact on his right rear tire. We lose a little bit of ground, but we're still within about a half a second here. Moving on to lap 12, there's a handful of pit stops, nothing really too major, but we did lose a little bit of nose cone damage. We had a little bit of contact around the wall, but Fernando Alonso now in front of us in P9, and Dan Tickton still trailing, now about 7.2 seconds behind us in P11, as at the end of lap 12 is when we're going to be making a pit stop for the hard compound. As Kevin Magnussen still tries to defend his position against Fernando Alonso there, as we're rounding off the top 10, and knowing that I'm going to be losing a couple of positions against Dan Tickton, Joe Grenier, and I believe Vettel and Schumacher as well. Got a good view of our pit crew here, a slight variation of our driver suit. Very good job from Venturi Studios once again. As we end up coming out between Alexander Albon and George Russell. You can see George Russell appearing there in the mirrors as we kind of ruin his momentum as we get up to speed on these cold hard tires on lap 13 here. Trying to make our racing line as good as possible as we try to hold our position against George Russell. He's still closing in now. Just under 0.2 of a second, and we have DRS here as he makes a move on the outside of that lane, side by side here with Charles Leclerc closing in behind us as well, trying to move. We hold the inside line here, almost had a little bit of contact from George Russell as we hold this horseshoe, and coming up to the cage here on these hard tires, a little bit of contact on that inside wall, and with the momentum we had, we kind of lose traction of our racing line. George Russell and Charles Leclerc get a better racing line behind me as I'm still trying to get used to that chicane and that uphill section so I'm not spinning out as we hit the DRS line, and George Russell makes a move on the inside, and Charles Leclerc closing in. We move to defend the inside line, overshoot a little bit, barely missing the outside wall as we hold that position to George Russell. And it turns out that Charles Leclerc actually goes into the pits here. So, no, it's going to be the next lap Charles Leclerc goes in. I apologize. There was a little bit of contact earlier with Charles Leclerc, but as we're still defending against George Russell, we gain a little bit of ground, but Charles Leclerc is still putting the pressure on Russell here as we come about the S curves, and still having to go a little bit wide on that turn behind the hash of Kevin Magnussen. Got a few warnings for going wide on that turn for exceeding track limits, even though it was runoff. A little bit of contact there from George Russell here as he's on the outside lane, on the quicker tires. We hold the inside line and we pull it pretty good. Still defending our position is George Russell, even though these are brand new hard tires, and George Russell did pit for the mediums a couple laps ago at this point. Spinning out a little bit there on the uphill section, and cutting the curve a little bit on the inside of the highway section here. It's coming down the straight, and once again George Russell and Charles Leclerc trying to make a move on the inside with DRS. Leclerc moves to the outside lane, tries to make a move. We move to the outside lane, give George Russell the room. He ends up locking up a bit, and in turn that caused a little bit of contact between him and Leclerc. Leclerc, you see him going into the pits there, as a couple other people do. Moving on to lap 17, we have our first DNF of the race, which comes from Max Verstappen. Just said a mechanical failure with the screen here as rounding out turn 1, and he just pulls off just right in time. It's going to be a sector 1 yellow flag, no safety car at this point. Moving on to lap 19, we still regain some positions. We're still trying to fight against Kevin Magnussen here. We're just over half a second behind him. Charles Leclerc pushing on the outside with those medium tires, having to deal with him pretty much the whole race here as he regained some positions against us when he came in from the contact with George Russell. Kevin Magnussen still gaining a little bit of ground here, and yeah, moving on. Around the same time, they're going to be perspective of Leclerc here. A little bit of contact there, and this is when he comes in. He ends up going into the pits twice. I don't know if he went in for a single stop strategy and there was too much damage, or he had a double stop medium for his race strategy. But around the same time that happened, Joe Granu ends up getting a mechanical failure, and he's stuck in the section 2, sector 2 straight. As you can see, Tipton, Schumacher, and Vettel pass there. And then you can see that Russell gets backed up in the mirrors here with losing in position to Alexander Albon, and then he moves out of the way. And then you can know that Nicholas Latifi and Lance Stroll do end up passing him as he finds his spot off the track. Moving on to lap 20, rounding out that lap here, we're still fighting for position with Kevin Magnussen. We're still trailing about 4 seconds behind Daniel Ricciardo, but I'm still trying to put that pressure on Magnussen here, try to get into P8 and get those points. We're hitting those S-curves a lot better, and then this hard left-hander. Getting another warning here, actually, as we try to keep that car straight as possible. We don't really make any ground up until this point here is lap 25, the back straight. We get DRS the last few laps, but we finally decide to make our move, hit the late brakes and cut the corner, and he tries to do a cutback, but we do hold the line and come out in front of Magnussen for the start of lap 26 here, rounding out towards the end of the race. Moving on towards lap 28, you can see a perspective from Magnussen. My mechanic pretty much tells me it's okay. These parts of your car are on their last legs, and I'm just glad it wasn't leading to a DNF. I basically said, fuck it, and I'm like, I'm going to push to the end of the race with these parts. I'm just hoping it doesn't break before the end of the next lap. You can see the smoke trail from Kevin Magnussen's perspective, and it basically makes you feel like I'm a runaway train. You can see the cockpit view here from Magnussen on the final lap, as rounding out those S-curves, and you can see how difficult it is. And at this point on the last lap, I was experiencing a little bit of power loss, but not too bad to where I wasn't able to defend against Magnussen. And then you could usually see how difficult it was for Magnussen to catch up and try to regain that position. We're coming up to the S-curves, and I don't know what was going on here, but Magnussen ends up hitting my side pod, and we end up getting caught up against each other up until this back straight. And he ends up getting position on the back straight here. It's going to be the perspective here. I ended up going a little wide on the horseshoe. He ends up pulling up next to me. And then he tries to cut on the inside. We're trying to hold our line here, and in turn we end up taking out his whole entire front wing here. And you can see that we pinned him against the wall there, forcing him to cut the inside corner of the back straight under the highway. As we're going to get a third perspective here in third person view. We end up going wide here, holding the inside line, trying to hold our line as best as possible, and we cut over, and that's what caused the contact there. Was we cut back over across the lane, trying to get as best as we can into this sector. And of course Magnussen had a better launch here on the back straight, but with DRS open, I was still able to manage to stay close enough to him. And even though he had DRS open as well, but we just went for it, dived on the inside, and tried to get in front of him and hold him as we hold him against the back wall and stay in front of him to round up the end of this race in P8.
All right, race over. Take care of the car on the way in.
Here we are then, a phenomenal Miami Grand Prix, and what a great show of skill from our race winners today. Anthony, tell me, what was it that helped them achieve this success?
Well, I honestly feel it was down to the driver and car today. I mean, we can talk driver skill all day, but if you don't have a solid team to back that, you're never going to get anywhere. When you hit that sweet spot of having both an excellent driver and an incredible car, that's when you see results like those we witnessed today.
Here come today's winners. The team at Red Bull have done a phenomenal job recently, and it's clear to see that they've put in the work, and they should be so proud of the victory they secured here. Drivers' standings. Carlos Sainz extends his lead at the top, getting ever closer to securing the championship. Now, let's discuss, Ant. Who would you say is a contender for driver of the day?
Daniel Ticktum gets my vote today.
Let's move on to the constructors. The lead at the top comes down after a strong weekend from the challenging pack. It was also a strong Grand Prix from Haas F1 this weekend. Fantastic work from the American team to move themselves further up the table. It's been an absolutely wild weekend of Formula One action. I can't wait to see what's next.
All right, pretty rough race, especially with that fight against Kevin Magnussen here. I don't really know what happened there at the end of the race. There was contact, and you guys will be seeing this after I find out what happened with the third-person view and the replays. But I definitely knew it was a tough fight, trying to defend against George Russell as well as Kevin Magnussen and Charles Leclerc. I noticed that he went into the pits late, for what looks here to be a second pit stop, and that probably wasn't a planned pit stop, but there's probably a little bit of contact across from us. But we had a lot of issues with our car today, but we managed, and it was a pretty good Miami Grand Prix. We managed to score 4 more points for the team, and as you guys saw with the Constructors Championship, we're sitting good in 6th place, ahead of Haas, even though it's about 6 points or so. And then we're sitting tight in P10 for the driver's standings, 2 points ahead of George Russell and 2 points behind of Daniel Ricciardo. So that'll pretty much wrap it up for this video, and we will see you guys in week 4.